Cookies! If you opened a web browser in the last 10 years, you've heard of them. And they exist for a good reason. If you log into a website, you want that site to remember who you are until you log out. Cookies enable that. Just a heads up, I'm going to talk about HTTP a bunch in this video. If this sounds unfamiliar to you at any point, I have an introduction video that will bring you up to speed. So, HTTP is a stateless protocol. The server looks at your request, generates a response based on that, done. Servers don't have to keep any context on what previously happened. They can just live in the moment, one request at a time. Although HTTP doesn't have any state, your application is free to keep as much state as it wants to. That's where the cookies come in. Here's how that works. You sent your login data to a server. If the data you entered is correct, the server will usually attach a set cookie header to the HTTP response containing a secret code word that is unique to your recent login. That's your session token. Your browser will include that code word as a cookie header in all requests to that website until the cookie expires. The server then passes the session token to the application, allowing it to recognize you from having logged in earlier. So that's why, thanks to cookies, you don't have to enter your login again every time you go to a different page. If that's all websites ever used cookies for, pretty much everyone would be fine with it. Those who are not would probably want to disable all cookies, which you can already do, or just not log in. But there are more controversial types of cookies. Marketing cookies are a classic example. In some cases, they are used to link your browsing activity across the internet to build a profile of who you are and what you're interested in. Some people feel awkward about sharing so much information with companies they've never heard of, and they try to block those cookies as best they can. In extreme cases, this leads to cat and mouse games where internet users install privacy protections and marketing companies try to circumvent those. Even if you block cookies completely in your browser at the cost of being unable to log into anything, it is still possible to uniquely identify you with simple HTTP calls. These techniques can be traced way back to at least 2003, and as you'll discover, there is no simple fix for this. This all still works 18 years later. The goal of this experiment will be to assign a unique identifier to your session and trick your browser into sending it to the server anytime we want to. To do this, we'll be abusing your browser's cache. As you probably know, cache is a short-term memory for browsers. It saves temporary copies of web pages, images, scripts, and other data you've recently accessed so that sites you use frequently load faster. Not only is this a time saver, it also helps you get more mileage out of a data-capped internet connection. So, for this trick I will use the ETag header. It's an HTTP response header that helps your browser figure out if its cache is still fresh. When you request a specific resource for the first time, the server can send you some kind of unique version tag. Your browser can store that in cache, alongside the resource itself. Next time it needs the resource, it uses an if non-match request header to say to the server, "This is the version I have in cache." The server will either tell your browser to reuse its cache by sending a 304 not modified response, or it will give you an updated version. Now, let's do that again, but for evil purposes. I make a web page that launches a request to a special tracking URL in the background. If the browser doesn't attach an if non-match header to the request, we'll make the server send a different ETag value every time. If the request does have an if non-match header, we'll make the server say your cached version is up to date. My webpage can read the ETag value and link it to all your browsing activity on the website, even if you decided to block my cookies. Congratulations, you've been tracked. So how would you block this without losing the advantages of cache? On desktop computers, you could use Privacy Possum. This browser extension will monitor all HTTP responses from external websites, automatically removing ETag headers until it can verify that the ETag isn't changing every time. On mobile, your options are more limited. I only know that Firefox for Android also has support for Privacy Possum. Got that installed? Good. I can still track you. I'll add a randomized timestamp from the past as the last modified response header. When requesting my tracking URL, your browser will send that back to the server in the if modified since request header. Same idea, different flavor really. It can still be a unique identifier, it just happens to look like a timestamp. Oddly enough, even though this technique's pretty similar to the first one, I didn't immediately find any fixes for this. While Privacy Possum did not support blocking this behavior yet, at least when I was producing this video, it should be preventable in a similar way. If you find anything that blocks it, let me know in the comments. Suppose you did find a way to block it, don't worry, I still have another trick up my sleeve. This one involves permanent HTTP redirects. When your browser requests my tracking URL, I will make the server redirect you to the same URL but with a randomized unique identifier appended to it. To speed things up, browsers remember this permanent redirect and immediately go to the new location next time. Coincidentally, this does have the side effect of doing a GET request to your unique tracking link. All I need to do now is to make my web page extract the identifier from the response URL, and there you go, got you again. Blocking this behavior is also tricky. In theory, you could let your browser not cache permanent redirects until the second time you hit them, and only if the redirect URL is the same as the first time. But I didn't find any browser extensions doing this, and I didn't even find a browser that lets you disable the permanent redirect cache entirely. I did notice during testing in Firefox that when you refresh the page that requests the tracking URL, the cached redirect was not used. This makes the technique a bit more fragile, which of course means it's less useful to tracking companies. So yeah, HTTP cache does have a few tracking loopholes. And then we're not even talking about browser fingerprinting yet, which are techniques that identify you based on characteristics of your browser install that make it unique. If that makes you feel like moving to Norway, going off the grid, and herding goats for the rest of your life, I understand. But with GDPR and other privacy laws, governments across the world have started getting more serious about your personal data. Plus, anti-tracking software is also evolving. I'm personally most concerned about third-party tracking by specialized services, and tools like uBlock Origin do allow you to block all requests to sites you don't trust. And it's not perfect, but it does give you more control over your online experience. And that's it for today's video. So how do you feel about all of this? Are you concerned about online tracking, or do you feel pretty relaxed about it? You can share your opinion in the comments. Thanks for watching. See you next time.